It's not because I'm a diva or I feel like I need to be on mic, but my name's Tim Norris. I work for a company called mParticle. How many of you have actually heard of mParticle before? Is that something you've heard of? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. That's actually not bad, because for something that's considered the internet's best kept secret, you know, powering some of the world's fastest growing customer experiences, it's remarkable how many people don't know who we are. We deliberately hide away, I think, from the limelight because we're a data pipeline, and no customer ever, as far as I can tell, said, hey, Spotify, I love your product, but where's your data pipeline? Show me your data pipeline. It just doesn't happen. And today we wanted to join this meetup because, you know, we've been helping brands to step away a little bit from the architectural questions. And the reason why we have this focus today on customer experience is because of all of the business imperatives that actually drive the requirement for modern data architecture behind that, are really forcing brands to start thinking about the way that they can build new experiences faster, the way that they can move their KPIs quicker. We hear a lot about experimentation platforms, and we see a huge amount of competition in the brand space today because the barriers to entry have been lowered. And so we thought we'd kind of paraphrase Mark Zuckerberg, who had the famous slogan of move fast and break things, right? That was what he said when Facebook was growing at all costs, right? To actually think about how we can move fast and make things. So what does that actually mean? And actually, yeah, that's a good point. So we have a slide here with some, with a kind of an agenda. So there's going to be a few people come up. So I'm going to start. I'm Tim. I'm going to talk a little bit about the big picture, macro trends, what's driving all of this. My colleague Alex is going to come up, and he's going to talk about why it's so fucking hard, frankly. Because if you're a big brand, it's not as easy as going, oh, just go make some stuff, unless you have a tool like ours. And then John, who you just saw a minute ago, who is both helping me with AV and being a great guy with technology, but also is our solution engineer, is going to run you through the platform, going to show you what a customer data pipeline like ours can do to automate a lot of the data processes, the integrations, you know, build upon the API economy that we have today to start moving faster and building customer experiences. And then finally, we've even got a customer, Luno. So Shrinu and a partner of ours, Adjust, in the mobile space are going to come up. And they're very much not a traditional brand. They're the opposite. They're the opposite of Marks and Spencer's because they are a cryptocurrency company who are helping the world to kind of do more with their money and break away from traditional finance. And that's really interesting because, you know, not being encumbered by the legacy means they've had a great opportunity to go out and build stuff super quick. And he's a super interesting guy, Shrinu, so we're glad to be joined by him. But before we get there, you know, let's talk about this topic of move fast and make things. Customers use us, right, because they've recognized this sudden requirement to start adapting faster as the stakes have got higher in customer experience, right? So they're looking for flexibility, extensibility, and real-time connectivity. That's it in terms of our pitch. Pitch over, right? These people use us, fantastic, it's across all verticals, but that doesn't matter. Why are they using us? Well, the thing is that behind the customer experience, there's this concept that even in digital, if you think about just digital businesses, they've shifted from a kind of single point paradigm of the web of a browser to something that's actually massively multi-threaded, like humongously multi-threaded. Now, everybody talks about this. Like the big guys talk about it, Salesforce, Adobe, Oracle come in and go, you've got all these different touch points. What they don't want to talk about is that behind every single touch point and every single experience you need to build has been this absolute, pardon my French camera, clusterfuck of solution providers that come along to power all of these. These guys are specialists in the supply chain, whether it's someone who can deliver something around voice analytics, customer data intelligence, visualization, web analytics, performance, attribution, you name it, enablement, intelligence, local marketing, geospatial awareness. There's over 8,000 tools to choose from just in what they call the marketing technology landscape before you get into other scapes. And this is problematic, right? Because if you work in big data and you've got teams that want to license these tools to solve for individual pieces of the problem, then what happens is you're responsible for instrumenting and directing the data to these tools, which change. And yeah, point solutions are good for a reason, but they're also bad for a reason. So that's the first thing. But also, There's more competitors than ever before. I mean, how many of you have been advertised a mattress in the last day even? I think I used to say in the last week, but now it's like in the last day. You just need an idea, a Shopify account, a credit card, and you can take a really average idea and you can become a competitor to somebody in a real-time bid on an advertising impression on a social network in seconds, right? The barrier to entry is incredibly low. And this is actually having some incredible impacts on the requirement for customer experience. Because as direct-to-consumer comes along and mobile becomes the center of everyone's experience, the big guys are having to keep up with this, right? Pretty interesting paradigm shift. This is one hell of a hockey stick to have happened in a short space of time. If you're, John Lewis or Dreams Mattress Superstore, which I no longer go to because I bought a Simba sleep. Thank you, Simba. But guess what? There's a dirty secret behind a lot of this, actually. That whole ad spend thing, there's no data strategy behind a lot of these companies. This is not data-driven growth. It's just throw money at the problem, right? They're not using data science. They're not leveraging great engineering and analytics. They're building an idea. They're designing something beautiful, and they're taking it to market with ad spend growth. Look at the advertising market. Advertising market's been growing and growing and growing. Very good for a bunch of ad executives somewhere. Very good for Facebook, for Google, for Instagram, for everyone else. And it's all shifting into mobile, and everybody's competing for the same number of eyes. So actually, this is unsustainable. Completely unsustainable business model. Like if you actually look behind what happens in advertising, customer acquisition costs are rising so much faster than most people have even considered. They haven't even had a chance to calculate the LTV before they realize they were net negative. And if it carries on, what you see is that businesses just go out of business, right? They flare up, huge valuations, and then they go away. So it has to change. And that's actually why we're seeing this much, much bigger, broader shift from the best companies, the ones who are winning. So you look at companies like Spotify, Airbnb, King.com, Supercell, Starbucks. They shifted away from advertising. They did it, right? And they started to focus actually first on marketing, retention, lifetime value, but now they're moving to a new world, customer experience. And customer experience is all about the data. And it's all about how actually you can leverage your data resources, not just your data assets, to hone in on the things that consumers want that are going to drive the best CX. So all of these guys are mParticle customers actually, in very different ways, very, very different ways. But all of them have realized that the only moat that's going to make them survive is customer experience. So think about, let's take this one, right? I pick and choose these like it's fun. But I love Spotify. And it's a pretty competitive market, right? Apple's offering it for me for free. E offers it to me for free. Deezer's always offering me something. My car came with 2 years of Deezer. I never opened the app once. I pay £15 a month to Spotify. Why? It's because of their ability to analyze the data and their ability to create product that drives a better customer experience in the form of Discover Weekly. For me, it's all about Discover Weekly and Release Radar, right? Highly data intensive, highly personalized, one-to-one experiences that are lifting that bar for everybody in this space, right? I barely even remember what our price was now, And with Spotify, this stuff like natural language processing and audio recognition, their resources are not infinite. What they did actually was make a pronounced decision to direct their engineering resources to what matters, which is machine learning, optimization, personalization, and one-to-one customer experience, as opposed to table stakes stuff like ETL. Outsource the ETL, get the right platforms in to do the dog work, and focus on the good stuff. And I'll talk a bit about Burger King later, but what these guys are all doing, right? These are, in many ways, these guys are becoming incumbents in the space. Airbnb and Spotify. Burger King and Starbucks very much are incumbents, but Starbucks is actually one of the world's largest mobile payments processors now. Most people don't realize that. At any given time, there's $2 billion of money running through the Starbucks payment app. right? People are loading money on, they're direct debiting cash into Starbucks so they can get coffee, and they're more capitalized than some Italian banks are right now, just through their payment app for coffee. It's kind of incredible. And they did that by delivering a seamless payment experience for their coffee at the till. Amazing. So what is CX? I think when we think about customer experience, most people get really hung up on this bit. What does it look like? What does it feel like? Design, right? That's true. I think like if you don't have a great design, if you're not focusing your efforts on flow, sign up, all the things that matter in terms of creative, whether your customer experience is inside an app or an experience or in an ad that you're using to drive somewhere, drive somebody there, design is key. Don't get me wrong. But today, when we think about the bar that's being raised by the likes of those companies, it's a combination of two things. It's the always-on availability of data to that front end. And this is the bit that brands tend to struggle with. It's like, how do we make sure that we have the data available to those systems to power that customer experience? Because the imperative today obviously is to deliver a seamless, always-on, pretty engaging and highly relevant customer experience to each individual person. So let's look at some examples of where people didn't apply data to growth and what happens. So we talked about advertising as the old model, right? Advertise, spend some money, get some customers, everything's going to be okay. I mean, buy these fucking slippers is not the way to do it. How many times have you seen an ad from this company? Anyone? Mojabes? Wow, it's actually pretty low. My wife bought a pair. Then they went bankrupt. So she couldn't return them, which is pretty sad. These guys spend, right? That was the idea. But there was no consideration about the fact that people don't buy slippers that regularly. No thought about the long-term value of their brand or the lifetime value of the consumer. And therefore, when you look at what happens if you don't start to apply data to the growth strategies around your customer experience, there's not much of a gap here, right? There's not much to trade off. The actual acquisition cost inside social platforms, I said before, is going up 10 to 15% year over year. Well, you don't need to do the math. We need data people to be helping the growth side of the house in net new businesses to actually stop this from happening so there are more successes. And the only way you can do that is by lifting LTV. And lifting LTV is not something that lives inside of marketing traditionally. It lives inside of data science. So we now start to see the coming together of two worlds. We start to see that marketing and retention come together. The idea of a growth team is a new concept inside all of these fastest growing brands. The growth team is the key engine. And they don't bifurcate between acquisition cost and retention and anything else. They focus on LTV. That's the key thing there. And the reason is because Pareto's law starts to break down when you think about advertising, right? So if you're going to have 1,000 new brands released every single month, and every single one's going to go down the advertising track, right? There's only so much space in the world for us to see messages from brands. And there's only ever going to be 75 to 80% of the revenue coming from either 25 to 20% of the base. But every single one of them, traditionally, is just throwing the money out on the same basis. I want to buy men. I want to buy guys who like lounging around at home. That's like the least data-driven audience segment ever. Guess what? That's what you're provided by most of these social networks. So of course, over time, things don't look too bad to begin with, but what ends up happening is that you net out in a really bad position from this strategy. Now let's look at an example of someone who does apply data to their growth strategy. So we work with King.com. I think like in my head, like it should never be able to make money, like Candy Crush. Like I don't know how they've managed to IPO. They've managed to go through 12, 13 years of consistent growth off the back of some candy. I have played it fairly extensively, I'll admit it. I stopped, then I went back, and then I stopped again. And the thing is about Candy Crush that they're always optimizing everything. They're applying data to every single piece of every single part of the customer experience. And it even extends to outside of the app. So when you're sitting on Facebook, let's say you played this game before. Nobody really knows this. But you got to level 7. You got 3 boosters in your back pocket. You know, maybe you're on what's the name of the land? You're on the Raspberry Races, great land, in a specific world. They use every single attribute about each individual user to tailor the creative to one of 3 million different permutations of that creative, so that you're much more highly likely to click on it and go back into the game. Essentially what they do is they take an advertising opportunity that everybody else pays the same amount for, but they take a 100x approach to customizing the experience inside the ad, even though you're not inside the application right now. It's pretty incredible, actually. Like, every single person sees a different version of the ad. Unbelievable. And they even take a different approach to bidding. They say, well, what's the LTV of this user? This guy never bought anything. And they close that gap. They close that gap by using data science to apply bid strategy to an individual instead of buying audiences. And what does that do? Well, it enables them to IPO. It enables them to take a game where you swipe candy backwards and forwards on a mobile phone, as opposed to a physical, tangible product, and grow despite everything. Pretty amazing. Here's another one. So, have you heard of the Whopper detour? Has anybody heard about this? You have. Awesome. It was in the press, right?
Oh, they were at Cannes.
They were at Cannes, exactly. So this was an advertising campaign that won every single major award at Cannes. The Titanium Grand Prix, the Gold Grand Prix, the Mobile Grand Prix. Do you know what they did? They just said, we just want to punk McDonald's customers. We want to cause as much trouble for McDonald's as possible by sending people to McDonald's, right? We want to send them there to get a Whopper for 1 cent. And everyone's a bit like, how does that work? Well, they're like, we know that we have to become a more data-driven company. We need more direct customer relationships. We need people to consume and engage with us on mobile. And that's not easy if you're a burger brand, right? So they came up with this idea that they would buy billboards all around the big cities that said, get a Whopper for 1 cent only at McDonald's. Download the Burger King app, drive to within 600 feet of a McDonald's. The second you enter the geofence, you get sent a geo-targeted, very specific push message. The push message gives you a voucher. The voucher has the instructions for the nearest Burger King, so it gives you the driving instructions to go to the other drive-through. You go there and you redeem it. Now, this is actually harder than they used to just give vouchers out in the newspaper for a free burger. Nobody fucking redeemed it. Nobody. They could give them away and nobody cared. But what they actually did here is really interesting. They created a bit of a game, right? They created something that people wanted to experience this because it was fun, right? They were like, oh my God, that's so funny. They backed up all the McDonald's drive-thrus across the US. They geo-fenced 140,000 McDonald's stores, right? Manually. If it wasn't hard, someone else would have done it, right? And they were able to drive results that were just through the roof. They've done these campaigns for years, but they drove 4.5 million app downloads, right? This one campaign outperformed their previous best campaign by 40x over a coupon promo. And the ROI on it, and it wasn't a cheap thing, right? They had a lot of work to do, a lot of labor, was 37 to 1. So, I mean, you start to think about this and you realize that, let's just go back one. Sorry, I'm totally getting into your slides here, Alex. Yeah, it's hard, but the imperative is there. And brands like Burger King are starting to do this. So previously, when I talked about some of this stuff that was happening, it was all the digital first. It was all the data rich. All the guys who have no legacy and no encumbrance were the ones who are moving forward. Everybody's catching up. Everybody's starting to do this. So the imperative's on you. We're starting to see now that they're scrabbling around in their businesses, the incumbents. They're saying, where can I find a guy who can help me to execute a campaign like this? Where can I find the tools that can help me to do this? And how can I do it yesterday? So I'm going to hand over to Alex now. Hopefully this is insightful, a bit about how people are using data to drive CX. Alex is going to talk a little bit about the status quo and some of the challenges that people face. And then we'll move on to the next bit. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. Insightful as always. So brands increasingly are struggling to move fast and make things happen with their customer experience delivery. So what I wanted to do today is spend 8 or 9 minutes just talking about 4 of the key challenges that are holding back brands. I'll also provide a very short overview of the mParticle platform and then hand over to John, who's going to talk about and also demonstrate mParticle from a technical perspective. So why is it that brands struggle to move fast? Firstly, the customer journey is broken. It has become fragmented because nowadays we as consumers interact with brands in a series of moments. And this is across a plethora of screens and devices, whilst we're at home, on the go, and in the office. Now, whether it's an in-app browsing session, perhaps a polite rant on social media, perhaps we're buying something online, or even just calling up technical support, we're all just creating so much data. And this data has been stored all over the show, right? Now, this issue, when coupled with the proliferation of customer contact channels over time, means that teams across the enterprise are struggling to put all the pieces of the customer journey puzzle together quickly and efficiently. And in mParticle's view, without a truly single customer view for all teams to work with, it's really hard for brands to move fast and make things happen. So that's number one. Number two, the enterprise itself has become internally fragmented. And when we think about it, customer service, marketing, IT, enterprise architecture teams still largely operate within silos, when in fact perhaps they should be grouped under a centralized customer experience function. And as things stand today, teams aren't as agile as they ought to be if they're going to keep up with the evolving and demanding consumer expectations. Now, in terms of my relatively short time at mParticle, which is approaching 5 months, I've seen a recurring theme across the businesses that have approached us, asking us to help them solve for their most pressing customer experience challenges, if you may. And I wanted to talk about 3 of those today. Firstly, the CRM teams and loyalty teams are really struggling to gain a real-time view of online consumer behaviors, preferences, and also transactions, which means loyalty offers are often out of sync or totally irrelevant. Let's use myself as an example. Only the other day, I received a promotional email from one of my favorite retailers suggesting I rush down to my local store to buy for myself the perfect bra. Right? Perhaps I'm missing something. Maybe it'll look good on me, who knows? The second issue that seems to crop up more often than others is that marketing itself doesn't have a real-time view of ongoing customer service issues. For example, complaints as a result of failed online deliveries or in-store issues, right? And what this means is that unhappy customers, thousands of them every day around the UK, continue to receive poorly timed special offers. And this further erodes that trust and the customer experience as well. And thirdly, given my experience in the contact center, this is my favorite, right? I used to help retailers and brands design complex call handling solutions for the contact center. And nowadays, right now, agents have extremely limited customer context made available to them via the agent user interface prior to being connected with a customer. And what that means is that consumers have to repeat themselves time and time again on the phone, more often, more than one person. And it takes time to resolve these queries, and again, it takes time for brands to move forward. Now, the third issue is that customer contact channels and other enterprise technologies seldom interoperate. These tools just don't play nicely together, and I don't think they're meant to, or perhaps they weren't supposed to, who knows. Now, in terms of the organization itself, tech is siloed much in the same way that internal enterprise teams are. And I'm guessing many of you in this room already know this, so I'll cut to the chase. Up until recently, it's been really hard for enterprises as a whole to connect all of their customer touch points in order to gain all of their customer data to be able to orchestrate that around their tech stack in a way that drives meaningful business outcomes for all of the various departments, CX, marketing, analytics, and what have you. And things continue to move slow. Perhaps as slow as this little dude here. While he may be cute, he's definitely slow. Now, jokes aside, I just wanted to have a quick recap. So far, I've covered 3 of the 4 issues that I was hoping to talk about: multi-threaded customer journeys, fragmented teams within the enterprise, as well as siloed technology. Now, from an mParticle perspective, what's needed is a foundational approach to unify the light system as well as the customer experience through the amalgamation of data, people, and technology. However, there's a fundamental issue that's preventing this from happening as quickly as executives would like. And that's an outdated data strategy, in the sense that strategy hasn't kept up with today's modern consumer, and yesterday's tools just don't cut it. For instance, CRM, largely regarded as a static tool. They don't operate in real time, and they weren't built to handle the many identifiers that you and I now have as a consumer. Mobile device IDs, email addresses, mobile numbers. CRM is just not cut out for that heavy load. Secondly, data management platforms. While they were really good, and still are, at handling anonymized customer data, they're not omni-channel at the core. They're not where the consumer is, and they're not really good at handling first-party customer data. And thirdly, data warehousing tools. You know, they're built in the cloud, they help in a brand pull all their data together, but they weren't built to help brands build, maintain, and activate consumer profiles for various marketing, engagement, and loyalty use cases. What's needed is a new approach to managing first-party customer data. And that's because customers nowadays move in real time. So it's time for businesses to catch up and keep up. This is where we come in. Now, mParticle is a customer data platform, or a CDP. And what we do really well is help an organization to stitch together all of their customer contact channels. This is both digital and offline, as well as CRM and other disparate sources. And what we then do is enable the collection of customer data at the event level, which we ingest into our platform and unify that around a common profile, which we then maintain in real time, right? And as new events come through, new user actions online occur, we resolve those events as attributes to the user profile, which really makes it really easy for product, customer experience, and analytics to drive forward their engagement as well as retention activities. We also have feeds back in from around 300 tools with whom we have pre-built integrations, so we can receive feeds back in from those tools for profile enrichment purposes, which are maintained in real time. But I'll let John dig into that a little bit deeper in a second. So this is why mParticle exists. We're here to solve the challenges that the enterprise has experienced for over 30 years. The challenge of multi-threaded customer journeys, the issue that teams are working out of sync with each other, as well as the fact that tech doesn't really interoperate with each other. And in terms of what we've enabled is a single and truly real-time view of today's omnipresent consumer. Through the democratization of first-party customer data, we're enabling teams to work in unison. Now, that's me just about done. However, if there was just one thing you took away from my session today, it's that through the democratization of data, we're helping to fuel a cultural revolution throughout the enterprise. And we've helped some of the world's best brands, as you've heard from Tim, to move fast and make things happen off of a solid first-party customer data foundation. So thanks very much for listening. Appreciate your time and for coming down tonight. That's me done. Over to John. Thank you. Here we go.
Just need to swap a few things over here.
Lights out. Cheers, John.
No worries. Okay, good evening everyone. So, been asked to just step in and do a little bit of more of a visual demonstration to some of the mParticle core features. Okay, so we've heard a lot around customer experience, around data availability, and we've talked about some of the notions around resolving customer profiles, building this identity of the consumer, and some of the use cases that Tim walked through as well. So if you look at what mParticle is as a customer data platform and some of the very kind of high level descriptions of what a CDP is, it's been depicted as a marketer managed system that's building a persistent and real-time customer profile and making that accessible to other systems. So some of the 4 areas I want to cover today is one around identity and kind of what this customer profile looks like, some of the components of that profile and where that data comes from. I'll also go on to this broad ecosystem of vendors that we work with, how that data is sent downstream for action, deeper insights, and analysis. We'll then look at some of the different ways data flows out of the tool and comes back into the tool. We've heard around things like what is a feed, what is an event or audience integration. And I'll talk about some of the tools like audiences and how that helps marketing teams. So first up, we have an example here from our user activity view, which is the mParticle dashboard view of a profile. Now, there is obviously a step before this, which is implementation. It's taking many of the client-side SDKs or server-side APIs that we provide to help standardize data collection, to help normalize the data and reduce a lot of the pre-processing that has to happen up front before that data can be kind of used essentially. So you can see here we have this profile, and one of the core things around mParticle is this notion of identity. So we have built a very comprehensive and complex, I'd say, approach to identity to solve for some of the challenges that we see and we've solved for with our customers. So this starts with the ability to deal with lots of different identifiers. So this might be anonymous IDs, this might be more transient things like a cookie, more persistent things like device identifiers, more known identifiers when it comes down to a customer ID or an email address. So we're basically giving the clients the ability to build their own hierarchy of identifiers, choose how we look up those profiles and how they should be resolved as users move between different states from anonymous to known, logged in to logged out. And all the while we're looking at these different states and we're adhering to business rules and we're adhering to wider corporate policy or broader privacy legislation to understand what we are allowed to do with that data. Now, can we merge profiles under certain conditions? Where is the user geographically and what is the actual privacy legislation in that country? But some of the data that we can then pull in, if allowed, is things around, obviously, the identities. We have things what we call a workspace, but that's synonymous with a company's brand. So if a company like King with multiple games logging into their platform and bringing up a user profile may surface that user has been seen on iOS across multiple different games. So you can start getting an understanding of how that user interacts with your brand across multiple properties. Now we're also bringing in the different types of inputs. So as I mentioned, mParticle really is an API of APIs. So firstly, we have built a suite of capabilities to ingest that data. So you can see here in this example profile, we have inputs from iOS, from web, from OTT platforms. We have data that can come in from games consoles, Alexa skills, and things like that. And then we have some examples of partner feeds where we are ingesting data from a server API that's bringing us data around enriched profile attributes coming from a machine learning algorithm that the company's running in their back end. Maybe data coming from a POS system, a point of sale tool that's given us information around the offline behaviors and interactions of the customer. Now, the profile extends further to give us an understanding of their device space that we've seen over time, audience membership that we've seen the user could becoming a current member of, and importantly, some of the attributes that sit at the user level. Now, if you think of how we see a user profile, it's this notion of like a dual data object. So we have the user ID and their associated attributes, and then we have all of the events, metadata, and attributes that are associated with that user. So we see the kind of the identifiers and the events and everything that we capture. So we can be picking up attributes here that are picked up from the client side. So as the user interacts, they change their preferences, they update settings in the app, on the web, wherever they may be. But this could also be data that is an LTV score, a propensity model, some other data that is being calculated outside of our platform and then sent back to us so we can enrich these profiles. And then that data is readily available to the marketing team to take action on and to shift the needle on how they run the kind of the CX. And then further down the bottom is the consent state. Again, a very important thing is that we provide an API for the collection of user consent defined by the brand and their purpose limitations. So, giving you an attribute and a key for event forwarding and audience connection. So we can automate some of those connections and we can gate control of how data flows out of the platform so the brands don't get in trouble with kind of oversharing and adhere to things like data minimization under GDPR. So we're building this interconnected profile. And I'll just move on to kind of what we can do with that data. What does this ecosystem of integrations look like? So moving over to the directory tab. And this is where I come back to being this API of APIs. So essentially, we are standardizing data collection. If you think about the challenges many brands face with apps these days, is that we've moved from, with all the advances of apps and phones, we've moved back to a process of shipping code, essentially. So you build an app, it's available on the App Store, a user downloads that code base, which is the app on their phone. But it becomes very hard to be more agile and to shift the needle and test and learn and experiment with different tools when you've shipped some code to that user and what they have on their devices is not necessarily very easy to change. So one thing we solve for is the notion of an SDK that can abstract a lot of these different technologies and do the data transfer server side. So if we take the world of apps, for example, here, we could be deployed and we'll be forwarding data to a bunch of the kind of analytics platforms. So we'll build on the integration to stream data onto Google, to Adobe, maybe to Facebook. Maybe we're sending data to kind of Snowplow I saw in the room earlier. And as you go through here, you can get a feel for the different integration endpoints we have. Further down on the left-hand menu, you'll see all the different categorizations spanning MarTech, AdTech, or even kind of infrastructural back-end systems. So if I go down to kind of things around raw data export, the data that flows into our platform can be readily and easily streamed to different parts of the AWS stack, a Kinesis real-time stream, a Kafka topic that we can feed that data onto, as well as data warehouse ETL processes to make sure we can stream a raw copy of all of the customer data to their teams for deeper insights and data science and further analytics or BI requirements. Now, down under the marketing channels here, you can see there's traditional things around deep linking, email marketing, marketing automation, and push messaging. Attribution tools as well. So we have Adjust, a partner of ours, coming up today as well to talk about how they work with mParticle. Now, these are bi-directional by nature as well. So many of these tools will be an event integration. So we'll basically, as we receive that data from any of these client-side or server-side applications, we resolve it to a profile, but we can stream all of those events downstream via an event connection. We also have audiences that I'll come on to, which is the ability to build a highly targeted, real-time, dynamic list of users and connect those for action in social channels, advertising, data management platforms, and many other use cases. And then we can also receive a feedback in to mParticle. And feeds provide that close the loop really on the user interaction. So if you think around campaigns, Adjust maybe delivering some advertising but want to deliver back to mParticle, the attribution and campaign that led to users installing that particular app. Maybe for the Burger King use case, we have forwarded all of the raw lat-long data for where the user currently is to a tool like Radar. And Radar will then make sense of that data for location intelligence and analytics. And then they will stream back to mParticle the details of the enriched location, exactly where they are they traveling, are they at home or at work maybe, what geofence maybe they've just crossed into. So then we can trigger an action down to a tool like Braze or Urban to send out that push message with that coupon. So you can see it's very much around data orchestration in real time across the organization for many use cases. So the next tab here is on connectors. And then in its rawest sense, mParticle is a series of inputs and outputs. So this view gives us insights into kind of the data that's flowing into the tool again. So the owned properties, our apps, our web, our platforms where we've deployed the client-side SDKs. We've got some examples again here. We can see our server-side APIs that are bringing us data from the back end. And then our partner integrations like Adjust, like a ClearBrain that does propensity scores and models around next best action of a user. So we're going to bring that data back in. Again, we're going to enable you to take what are typically tools that don't connect to each other and give you the ability to send data from a deep linking tool, propensity scores and models, an attribution tool, and feed that all into maybe a BI system or into an analytics tool. So if I click on, say, iOS app, So now we can see, again, this level of abstraction and this ability for mParticle to help with the decoupling of engineering tasks and resources with what the marketing teams and the business want to do to shift the needle and test and learn. So with mParticle's SDK in place, we're actually streaming data down to 17 different outputs, ranging again from attribution tools, the Google marketing platform, Snap, to retargeting platforms, to analytics tools, and many other examples on screen. But client side, we have one event that's been collected, and we are then taking that event, multiplexing server side, and delivering that in the required taxonomy for each of these different vendors. So it takes a lot of the pain out of the whole world, not just of mobile, but across web, across OTT, across game consoles, and everything else. And it becomes very easy to swap, to test, to try out new tools through mParticle's kind of integrations that we have. Now, I mentioned as well, this is open source, it's open and extensible platform. So our APIs on the partner side, it's very easy for us to add new integrations with a new partner, but it's also very easy for you guys or for the brand to take those APIs and extend the platform. So no longer being this kind of buy versus build, it's a buy and build capability. So just looking at time now, I'm going to skip on. Last piece is just around the audiences. And I will be available after this when Pizza and Beer comes out. If anyone has any additional questions or wants to speak to me. So lastly, we're talking about audiences. So just a different way in which mParticle connects that data to all these different downstream integrations. So the process, pretty straightforward, and that's the idea here. It's a marketer managed system. It puts the control back in the hand of the teams that need to deliver the messaging, have KPIs that they need to hit. So they need to be able to try these tools and get the data to where it needs to be in real time. And again, we democratize access to this data. So it's very easy for them to come in and select, as they decide to build an audience, kind of what's the breadth of that data set? Who are we trying to target here? Is our app base? Do we want to bring in those machine learned scores from the server side? Are we looking to ingest some of this data from a tool like Adjust to understand what led to that attributed install of that app? Now, I won't go through the full build process. I'll just maybe click on one of these examples here. So UI-wise, it's very easy now to go and step into building the criteria for the audience. And this can become as simple as looking at some lifecycle data. So how many sessions have I seen for this user? And when was the last time they visited the website or the app or one of these platforms? What device do we typically see them on? And this will be automatically picked up by the SDKs. And then we have all the other data around all of their raw events. Again, we can jump into all of the events that we've seen for that customer. We can look at the look back window. How often are we seeing these events across a certain time frame? We can look at all of the maybe e-commerce data, the user attributes. And again, it depends on whether this is a user acquisition, retention marketing, or re-engagement campaign for the data that they want to access, and then where they're going to be able to connect these audiences onto. And again, similar to what I showed earlier when we're connecting events, we have these pre-built integrations, but the nature here is that organizations no longer need to extract or ask their engineering team to build an extract of their users from their data warehouse. We have these integrations as accessing the data in real time, so they're no longer uploading static lists, and we are connecting the adds and drops from these audiences to all of these tools in real time, keeping them in sync. And sometimes I think around CX and the fact that sometimes it's not about hyper-personalization. It's not about what you're saying and what you're doing to deliver the experience. Sometimes it's about what you shouldn't be saying or what you shouldn't be doing. So the ability to suppress the data connections in real time to not over-message someone, and to stop targeting them with the same advert if you know they've already installed the game. So again, instead of wasting money and delivering better experiences. But I'm going to wrap it up there. I mean, there's lots of areas to the platform. I said I had like a short 10 minutes just to walk through kind of some of the core capabilities. But again, we don't want to necessarily just move fast and make things. We also don't want to move fast and break things. So there's many tools in here around QA, around schema management, around looking at the data quality and the data transparency and helping organizations kind of manage all of this data as it flows into and out of the platform. So I'll wrap it up there. Hope that was useful. I'm going to hand over to Shrinu now, who's going to come up and speak next.